So right here, I have the APC64. I've actually had this already for a while, and I've been making music with it. Is not my daily driver. My daily machines are going to be my MPCs. But with the beginning of this year, I wanted to challenge myself to just make music in my DAW, not with my MPC hardware. I just want to strictly make music in the DAW. The only thing about doing that was I just cannot do beats using a keyboard, because you actually can sample and trigger your samples from here, but I just cannot do that. So the APC60 has been great to control or to use it for my performance while I'm making beats. Now, by the end of this video, if you are interested in picking up the APC64, go down to the link of my video. I have links to Zounds, which Zounds is awesome to shop. All right, if you have any purchase that you need to make for audio equipment, I highly recommend Zounds. As a matter of fact, right now, this APC64 retails at $399. If you want to pick it up today, Zounds will ship it out to you. They don't do no background check. They don't check your credit. You go ahead and just receive it, start using it as you make payments. Any other piece of gear, audio cables, SD cards, turntables, go down to the link of my video. I have most of my beat making setup that you guys can purchase or look into. Now the 64, it integrates with Ableton very well, and I'm able to use this piece of hardware to control what I have going on right here with my drum rack, or if I'm chopping up any samples, I can trigger them using some of these pads right here. So that's what it's been good for. When I'm using Ableton and I want to make beats here, I'll use my drum rack as if it were an MPC. I just drag over samples and I'm able to trigger those samples from this hardware. So just having that hybrid of all of my samples that I have in my computer and just dragging them over and just triggering them with this piece of hardware has been a lot better than using my mouse or just clicking on my keyboard, which helps me with performing music, because when I started making music in the DAW, I just could not find myself when it came down to performing my music. I like the fact that I have all my sounds, the libraries, plugins, and all that, but when it came down to laying down a drum groove or performing some sample chops, that's where it just fell off for me, and I was like, yeah, I can't do it. I always come back to my MPC, but now with the 64 being able to trigger those sounds, I feel a lot more creative when I'm putting out ideas. Now you might be asking yourself, why would I want to use my DAW to make music when I already have an awesome workflow with my MPC? It's all about having the flexibility to mix while I'm producing, using some of my favorite plugins that I do not have on the MPC, being able to have Ableton called up, not really thinking about mixing, just performing and producing my track. But if I need to adjust anything with my drums or my sample chops, having some of my favorite plugins right at my fingertips has been awesome. That's honestly one of my reasons why I wanted to switch over, so I can do a little bit of mixing while I'm producing. Now, speaking about using some of my favorite plugins or even some of my instrument plugins has been, and this is new to me, I never had been able to do this even before when I used to just mix using my mouse and the keyboard, but having this controller allows me to adjust some of the parameters using the faders, which sounds cool, but where it really shines is when I'm automating. I like doing this a lot better because this is what I'm using as a mouse. So if I'm gonna ride some automation, this is kind of hard to adjust my filter knobs with my DAW as I'm recording my automation. So right now with the APC64, I use some of these sliders to adjust those parameters. So I feel like I'm performing my automation instead of setting parameters or just writing out my automation. Now, not only does it allow me to control some of my plugins, but also if I'm using some of the instrument plugins, if you got some LFOs, some filters that you want to be adjusting while you're performing, you could use some of these faders right here. Now, something that's been really, really cool, and this is something that I have not experienced with my MPCs, this is something that's been really fun with the APC64, is the step sequencer. The step sequencer is something that I've always wanted to try out and explore, but I just don't really like the way it functions on the MPC. The step sequencer right here on the APC64 is awesome. I'm not a natural drummer, so my groove isn't always the way I want it to be, but having the step sequencer allows me to come up with some interesting patterns that I can try out, take away some notes. And not only that, but it's awesome the fact that as I'm putting in my notes, Also on my left or on my right hand side, I have my velocity pad. So if I want to go full velocity, I hit the last pad up here in the upper right hand corner. If I want a slower velocity, I just adjust that as I perform these pads. It's hard to explain as I'm talking about it, but once you get your hands on it and you figure out the step sequencer, that's honestly one of my favorite things about it right now, where I just feel like it's helping me out come out with some grooves that I probably would not have done it if I were just performing a drum groove myself. Now, I don't play music. I cannot play chords, or I mean, I can hold a chord on the piano, but I cannot perform one chord to the next and to the next. When it comes down to that, I will just jack up my whole entire performance. Right here on the APC64, they got the chord and note mode, which is awesome because I put a specific chord. If I want to play something in C minor scale, I could just hit chord mode and just perform that. And no matter which pad I select, I'm on key. So that's been very helpful. And not just that, but when I'm not sampling and I want to come up with my own chords, I just put it in chord mode and I'll just mess around with some of these pads and see which progression sounds best to me, and I'll stick with that. I'll record that. So that's been really cool to mess with, especially someone like me that does not have that background to be able to perform those chords. Now, this thing can do a lot more. Those are just a few things that I had to point out that I've been exploring, that I've been having fun with, but there's so much more you can do. They got the CV connections in the back of it that I've seen other people hook up some external pieces of gear. That's a whole different world that I know nothing about. So I don't explore that. I have some synthesizers right here, but I have not tapped into that whatsoever. But let me jump into some things that I wish they were a bit different. I'll start off with the button layout of the 64. When I'm using the 64, I'm so used to having my play, stop buttons down on my any side, whether it's my left or right hand side, but it's so weird that the play, record, and stop button are up here, which is a little awkward. I keep trying, you know, I've had this for a while, but I keep expecting it to be down here, and I'm like, oh, it's up here. It's not too far to go up here, but it's still something that I'm not used to. And now the last thing that I will mention is, again, this is just a personal preference of mine. I've seen or I've heard other people that they like this feature, but for me, I'm not used to it as much yet, is the pad sensitivity. I'm used to being always in full velocity with my MPCs, so again, it goes back down to my personal preference. I'm not a musician. I don't perform music. So when it comes down to performing with pad sensitivity, it's taken me a long time to adjust performing with velocity changes on those pads. That's why I actually like the step sequencer, because with the step sequencer, I have my velocity sensitive pads on the side that I can choose how loud I want those to be, and I just click on the pads where I want to put those in the pattern. Now, who is the APC64 for? It's not going to be for everybody. Obviously, it's not for those that are looking to go fully standalone, or for anybody that wants to have a controller that's going to be, 90% of the time hands-on with the controller. I think the more you know this APC64, you're still going to have to do split with clicking around with your DAW and also using the hardware. So is this for someone that loves using Ableton, that knows, hey, Ableton is my way to go? I don't mind using the DAW, but I would like to have a piece of hardware where I can use to perform some of my drums or just sample chops. Now, I did a video a while ago and I actually produced a track with the APC64. I'll leave a link somewhere up here. And a lot of people were mentioning, hey, there's also the Ableton push, why not just get the push? The reason why it's just not an option for me is because I have my MPC. I feel like once I'm going into the Ableton push, it's kind of like a standalone machine, but it's not. So I'd rather just go for my MPC if I want to just do everything on my machine. This is not nowhere near the price of the Ableton push. This actually retails for $399, which is at a great price for what I want it to do. So I'm not trying to perform a whole entire beat on the Ableton push 100%. I just want to use my DAW and every now and then click around with my hardware. So yeah, overall, this is not my daily driver just because I don't make beats with my DAW on the regular, but when I do come into the DAW, this is what I like to have connected to it because it's something that pairs up very well with Ableton. So most of the time I'm gonna be using my MPCs, but whenever I hop over to the DAW, this is an awesome companion with your Ableton software. All right, so I'm gonna wrap it up right here. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, taking the time as we go through the APC64. I hope you guys got something out of this. I'll catch y'all on our next video. Peace.